Welcome. If you like AI, Terminator, and overall super philosophical conversations that are designed to bend your mind in pursuit of ultimate reality with a Christian twist, welcome because you're at the right place. This is the Dialogos Now inaugural podcast. So strap in. There's a lot of cool stuff happening, and I hope you enjoy. What we're going to talk about is based off of an article that I've written titled AI and the Rise of Digital Gods. But yeah, so I got exposed to AI just like everybody else did with the release of ChatGPT. What really kind of piqued my interest, though, it was an Elon Musk interview with Tucker Carlson. And in it, Elon Musk was talking about having a conversation with Larry Page, one of the co-founders of Google. And in it, Elon Musk basically said that he got the impression that Larry Page and Google were trying to build digital gods. And he even went as far as to call him a speciesist, somebody who has preference to the human species over robotics, which at face value, that's just its own type of insanity, but that kind of shows you the world that we're living in. So anyway, that sent me down like a rabbit hole. So what we're going to do in this podcast is I'm going to discuss the things that I looked at when it came to AI, looking at what the developers were saying, and really kind of revealing the true purpose of AI, whether or not these people are conscious or unconscious of what's happening. I basically believe that they are trying to build a digital god. So let's get into it. So after that Elon Musk interview, I really started looking into Larry Page and the founders of Google. And I stumbled across this super old interview. I'll see if I can find it and put it in here. But Larry Page was being interviewed and he said, "What's the purpose of Google?" And he said, in a nutshell, the purpose of Google is ultimately designed to build an AI. And he said that in the early 2000s. And again, it's 2025. Everybody is used to AI now, and we're kind of living in the AI bubble. But at this time, AI wasn't something that at least lay people were really tuned into. So I kept looking into the AI stuff. And then that's when I found out in 2012, Larry Page specifically or personally hired a man named Ray Kurzweil to work in Google's lab with the stated intention of trying to develop sentient AI. And Ray Kurzweil was really kind of like the big aha moment. So I started looking into him. And so who is Ray Kurzweil? Ray Kurzweil is one of the most famous futurists that there is. He's gained his fame primarily because he's been able to accurately predict the pace of technological development. And he's written many books on the subject. And essentially, he has a very strong track record when it comes to accurately predicting technological advances. So when I was doing my research on Ray Kurzweil, I stumbled across a documentary that I think that everybody should watch, and it's called Transcendent Man. And this documentary really kind of like showed the true intentions behind the developers. And so the very beginning of that documentary, Transcendent Man, which features Ray Kurzweil. So in the beginning of this documentary, it starts off with a statement by Ray Kurzweil, and I'm summarizing it here. I'll put it up on the screen, but it essentially said, "I have a recurring dream, and I'm by myself in a mansion, and I go in to many rooms, and every room in this mansion is empty, and then I get this crippling feeling filled with dread and despair, and it's the fear of death. And it makes me feel so terrible that I have to remind myself that I'm never going to die." That's how the documentary starts off. And it really shows you a couple of things with this. One, it shows you what the purpose of AI is for these developers. Say what you will about what AI is able to do, but at least from Ray Kurzweil's perspective, he is hoping to achieve immortality. And not only that, this is also caked with references to religion. Specifically within Christianity, heaven is described as a mansion that has many rooms. And later on in the documentary, Kurzweil talks about that there are a lot of religious parallels to his work and what he hopes that the singularity is going to achieve. But really, this is the most direct reference to specifically Christianity as opposed to any other religion or worldview. So the documentary goes on, and Ray Kurzweil basically says that there needs to be 3 revolutions in order for the singularity to take place. And the singularity, for those who don't know, this is the term that futurists have used. They've borrowed it from physics, And essentially, the singularity is this moment in time when technological advancement is happening at such a rapid pace that essentially every moment that moves forward, there's an exponential growth that's happening in technology. And the world beyond this point is going to be so different than anybody else's experience beforehand that we don't even know what it looks like. And so they call it a singularity, the singularity moment, which is when technological advancement reaches basically an infinite growth phase. So I'm going to explain to you how they believe that this is going to take place. And so Kurzweil ends up saying that there needs to be 3 revolutions in order for the singularity to take place. The first needs to be a revolution in genetics. He basically says that we need to have breakthroughs and advancements in the study of genetics. The next thing that we need is a revolution in nanotechnology. And nanotechnology is essentially, their vision of it is a super powerful computer that's the size of a blood cell that can literally go into your body and start to merge biology with machine. So you have your advancement in genetic understanding, and then you have your advancement in nanotechnology, and they're supposed to work together to start enhancing man. And then the final advancement needs to be robotics. And the main aspect of robotics is artificial intelligence. And that's kind of the secret sauce that's trying to put all of this stuff together. So from Kurzweil's perspective, these 3 different revolutions will all work in conjunction with one another to get us to the point of the singularity. So by studying genetics and by having nanotechnology and then having AI as the brain that can help advance these fields, what they're hoping to have occur is all 3 of them working together to allow for this super advancement of technology and ultimately get to their singularity moment, which has a lot of parallels with what you would imagine heaven to be. So this right here should tell you a lot of stuff. You can see the vision that Kurzweil has, which is he's essentially hoping that humanity will be able to merge with machine as a means to enhance humanity. And not only that, but he feels like this is an inevitable trajectory that mankind and reality is on. And if you want to understand what that's all about, you have to understand their understanding of evolution. Because there's one thing that all of these futurists ends up having in common. They're atheists, they're materialists, they're capitalists, and they all believe in evolution. And the evolution aspect is super important because if you understand the way that they look at evolution, it kind of makes everything else make sense. And Ray Kurzweil in this documentary actually explains his viewpoint on evolution. So he starts off with the classic stuff. There was a big bang. Everything was this primordial soup. A lightning bolt hits a pool of amino acids and out pops an amoeba. And we start developing from single-celled organisms all the way up into multi-celled organisms. And we start going and advancing further and further in our level of biological sophistication. And eventually, evolution produces humanity. And humanity is important in the futurist mind because humanity is able to bring in the air or the natural descendant of evolution through the form of technology. So through humanity, man is able to develop tools. And these tools are also subject to the same rules of evolution. And evolution in this perspective is really like infinite progress, okay? Almost in the Hegelian sense. So now humanity is able to transpose the purpose of reality onto machines. And it's in the machines that evolution is able to take place and this infinite progress is able to occur. So really, from this perspective, it seems that mankind is but a footnote or a stepping stool to allow for technology to come into existence and then be able to be molded and perfected via evolution so that it can achieve its goal of perfect infinite progress. So mankind creates the tools, but then it's the tools through these 3 different revolutions that we talked about that man is going to start merging with machine to create this type of cyborg, hive mind, ultimate intelligence entity that essentially, as the documentary says, transcends man. They're trying to go beyond the boundaries of humanity and trying to become something better, something greater, something more. So I think here's a good opportunity to kind of introduce why I titled my article AI and the Rise of Digital Gods. Because when you start looking at the ideas of the inventors and designers of AI, of robotics, of nanotechnology, then you start to see the vision that they want. And so now I think it's important to apply a supernatural lens to be able to try to understand what's really happening here. And in order to understand that, we're going to apply the lens of Christianity to kind of understand the state of human nature and the ultimate goals that mankind has. And you don't have to be religious to understand this, but just recognize that this is a viewpoint that you have probably never heard before, because I haven't heard anyone else speak of it, especially in this context. So all I ask is that you approach this with an open mind and give me charitable interpretation just so that I can get my perspective out. So in the beginning, God created the heavens and earth according to Christian theology. And not only that, but God created Adam and he created Eve. And they existed in this type of utopia or paradise called the Garden of Eden. And a lot of interesting stuff is happening theologically in this moment. So there's theologians that have stated that man possessed four supernatural gifts during this phase of being in the garden. And they are the following. They had direct communion with God, meaning that they were able to see God face to face in the garden. The second thing that they had was they had supernatural wisdom, not only of just the external material world, but they also had supernatural wisdom when it came to the interior or the spiritual realm. And next, they had integrity of the appetites, which is just a fancy way of saying they had total control of the different faculties of the soul. So, for example, Plato said that the soul is divided up into three parts: reason, will, and passion. And really, the purpose of life is trying to gain harmony between these three functions. And so, you want your reason dominating your will, which dominates your passions, which essentially just means that you behave in a virtuous way at all times. And this is the special gift that Adam and Eve had in the garden at this exact moment. And finally, they had physical immortality. Now, Christianity teaches that the soul by nature is always immortal, but they had a special gift of having bodily immortality, meaning that they physically were never going to die. So we all know the story. Adam and Eve disobeyed God and they got kicked out of the garden. Okay. And this moment is called the fall, or the fall of humanity. But this is what's super interesting. When the fall occurred, what happened was, according to theologians, is that these four special gifts that mankind had were removed. And the removal of these four gifts created four corresponding wounds. And these are known as the four wounds of the fall. So instead of God being visible, he became invisible, meaning that they couldn't actually see God anymore. And they also didn't have direct communion with him anymore. Instead of supernatural wisdom, we now have something called ignorance, meaning our intellect overall is dimmed, meaning we're not as smart as we were before. And not only do we not have a supernatural wisdom of the exterior world, but we're also ignorant when it comes to the internal and the spiritual realm. And next, instead of having integrity of the appetites, we have something called concupiscence, which is a fancy term for basically saying that evil appears to be good to us sometimes. And sometimes we take pleasure and enjoy doing evil. So instead of having perfect harmony of the soul with the reason, will, and passion, now our passions might dominate our reason. Our will might go above our reason. We could be scrambled up in all different types of ways in terms of the order of our soul and its different faculties. And finally, instead of physical immortality, we now have physical death. So the body can die. So really these four wounds, and this is what I'm saying, I believe that the history of humanity can be understood by man trying to heal these four different wounds. And so how does this tie into AI and all this stuff today? Because I'm saying that when you listen to the visionaries, the people who are developing AI technology, the futurists of the world, the transhumanists, I'm saying that this is just the most recent and probably the most potent manifestation of man trying to heal himself of the four wounds of the fall. Now, this is where it gets interesting theologically. And again, you don't have to agree with any of this stuff, but I'm just trying to articulate a specific worldview or viewpoint or lens in which I'm using to try to interpret what's happening right now in a historical sense. See,